I'd like to start with an image of a 17th century map. It reminds us that Ireland has always been a land of mapping firsts. This is Petty's Down Survey map of parts of County Antrim from 1655, here depicting Ballintoy and Rathlin Island. Taken in the years 1656 to 1658, the Down Survey of Ireland is the first detailed land survey on a national scale anywhere in the world. I'd encourage you to join PRONI again on the 21st of September at 7 p.m. when we can enjoy a talk on the Down Survey and learn how we can discover the maps further. So get that into your diary, your calendar. It should be a very interesting talk. This evening, however, I would like to provide a few background notes on the Ordnance Survey of Ireland, as it is important for us to think about an OS map as an engineered artifact. I will also introduce basic map reading skills and demonstrate how you can browse OS maps and modern base maps, including aerial imagery, to locate geographical boundaries, sites, buildings, and landmarks of historical interest in the 6 counties of present-day Northern Ireland. Less than 300 years after the Down Survey, the Ordnance Survey of Ireland began. With distrust over calculation of the civil tax, or cess, at the beginning of the 19th century, by 1819, the Duke of Wellington, as Master General of the Ordnance, agreed to conduct a survey of Ireland. The Ordnance Board organised military forces of its own. With complementary requirements for a military map and the fair administration of the cess, the Irish Ordnance Survey, led by Thomas Colby, completed the world's first large-scale survey of an entire country by 1846. This first survey, at a scale of 6 inches to 1 mile, was primarily a townland survey, and a more comprehensive survey was sought by 1867, so Sir Richard Griffith and his team could plot valuation. Surveying an entire country was a long and complicated task. First, Colby and his team had to build a framework of stations upon which the mapping could be based. This slide illustrates the site of the Divis station, where a more recent beacon was built in the 1950s. The formal term for these columns is triangulation pillar, but this is usually shortened to trig pillar, or more often trig point. Trig points are situated so that at least 2 other points can be seen from each station. The mapping was done by triangulation and by creating a series of primary triangles across the landscape. Sightings were taken between stations using field theodolites. Much of this work was done at night to reduce the distortion caused by heated air. In order to complete the network of triangles, the length of one leg of one triangle had to be measured. The leg chosen was along the shores of Lough Foyle, and this measured distance is known as the baseline. The accuracy of the measurement of the baseline was paramount, as it set the scale for the whole survey. Colby asked his assistant Thomas Drummond to develop a method based on the compensation principle, using parallel bars of 2 different metals, both iron and brass. Drummond's design allowed the bars to be connected in the middle with steel tongues fixed across the ends, leaving them free to shift according to the expansion or contraction of each bar. and allow the coefficient expansion of metal to be used in the calculation of distance. And such a statement like this just proves the scientific endeavour placed in Ordnance Survey at the start of the 19th century. Measurement of the baseline began in 1827 and was carried out under tenting to avoid fluctuations in temperature. The bars were mounted on tripods, and the total distance of 7.89 miles, which included crossing the River Roe, was completed after 60 days of measurement by 70 men. Colby selected a site on the flat eastern shore of Lough Foyle for a base, which was to be the longest of its kind and measured by methods to a standard of accuracy never before achieved anywhere in the world. This slide shows the South Ordnance Survey base tower at Ballykelly. Measurement of the base commenced on the 6th of September, 1827, initially under Colby's supervision, but later under the direction of Drummond, who was actually a leading mathematician. Work was completed on the 20th of November, 1828, having taken the most part of 2 summers to complete. The length of the base, levelled and reduced to the adjoining sea level, was 41,640.8873 feet, or as I mentioned, nearly 8 miles. Triangulation was then used to extend the northern end of the measured base to a station at Mount Sandy and onward to cover the whole of Ireland. Colby believed in sharing hardships as well as the achievements of his staff. After travelling with his men, he had helped to build camps and arranged mountaintop feasts with huge plum puddings at the end of each surveying season. These temporary camps have left their mark on the landscape also. The rings of stones that form the base of tents, for example, can be seen near the summit of Donard in the Mourne Mountains. The Survey of Ireland was finally completed in 1846, and the maps are now an unravelled resource for studying the period before the Great Irish Famine of 1847 to 50. This isn't a great image, but it just shows the fine detail of sheet 31 of Dungiven, surveyed in 1832, engraved that year. And each map is simply a drawing or picture of a landscape or location, and it would be seen from above, looking directly down. Each map will often show features such as tracts, rivers, buildings, trees, and lakes. Rough sketches made by the surveyors around Dungiven in 1826 are also in PRONI, and they remind us that these maps are also a record of the human experience of standing in and moving across the landscape as a surveyor. In the records, you can find scribbled notes where a local community has assisted the surveyor on the correct name given to a feature. For example, one surveyor notes that a lady mentioned, "Oh my sir, that's Kate's Bridge." And from this time, then, the names of local places become fixed by the Ordnance Survey map. The survey also weaves a web of mathematical lines across the landscape, meeting at trig points. Divis, Slieve Donard, Sewell, and smaller stacks, some of them prehistoric features, which leave their mark in the landscape today. On Divis, Colby noted the triangles, of which is the apex, cover a space of about 130 miles in one direction and about 80 miles in the other. No less than 200 points were observed from it, and it being Divis Mountain. Existing surveys were also referred to by Ordnance, such as this map of part of the Belfast Mountain showing Divis, Black Mountain and Hannestown Hill, surveyed by Thomas Pattison in 1820. So they do refer to existing maps, this one in PRONI. And indeed other examples indicate that Ordnance copied earlier maps as part of their progression, such as the 1836 Book of Traces, produced from Philip's survey of 1622, here illustrating Derry, Londonderry, and the London Company lands. And this is also available in PRONI. The OS maps themselves are an archive of process. In Portlock's words, looking then at the early sheets of the Irish map, the engineer will be struck by the vast amount of data expressed upon them by following the course of a chain line and noticing the successive levels marked along it. And indeed, as you can see on the image here on the slide, the little points and numbers are those points where the chain was dragged across the landscape. And this is explaining what we are looking at when we are looking at the maps today. Charles Close, the famous historian of the OS, puts it rather simply, I think, by saying from trig point to trig point, the chain was dragged. The sites marked on the OS map were also surveyed and recorded with accuracy in the field as the Royal Sappers and engineers progressed across the landscape. This example held by PRONI is a drawing of Navan Fort in County Armagh, surveyed in 1835. So the point I'd like to make just starting off this evening is sitting in an archive or at your computer, the emphasis is very much on the paper landscape, the map. To understand the numbers and symbols on that map, you may also wander around in a field and really get a sense of it as an engineered artifact. On urban OS maps, you will find BM numbers scattered across the page. Each number actually relates to a benchmark or permanent mark used by Ordnance Survey to establish height at any one point. A cut mark is the commonest form of benchmark, such as this one on University Road, Belfast. It consists of a horizontal bar cut into vertical brickwork, or in this case, stonework. A broad arrow is cut immediately below the center of the horizontal bar. They are established along all classes of leveling lines. A height value on the map refers to the center of this horizontal bar in the field. Also associated with settlements are the surveyor memoirs. Memoirs were written descriptions intended to accompany the maps, containing information that would not fit onto them. They document the landscape and situation, buildings and antiquities, land holdings and population, employment and livelihoods of the people living in a civil parish. The surveyors recorded the habits of the people, their food, drink, dress, and customs. They also provide information on local schools, churches, and landed estates, as well as descriptions of the towns and villages, and in some case, individual townlands. Ordnance memoirs give us a glimpse into the experiences of our ancestors living in these local communities. In the parish of Grey Abbey, County Down, Lieutenant Tucker noted that the general appearance of the eastern side of the parish is cold, uninteresting and bare. The people throughout the country unite farming with weaving. The females in the town make 2, 3 or 6 shillings a week at a fancy work. In Ballymena, the civil administrator notes, and I use their own words here, I stress, Strangers will find the town of Ballymena inhospitable, the people being chiefly engaged in business and solely bent upon making money. There is, however, a good deal of nice society among the neighbouring gentry and clergy. And the memoirs are available in PRONI as well as other local heritage libraries. I'd like to say a few words about reading symbols, because the basic skills in reading maps is definitely something you can transfer from one type of map to the other, or one age of Ordnance Survey map to a later survey. So rather than containing descriptions, OS maps have lines and symbols to show where certain things are. Symbols are used so maps don't have to be covered in writing, as this would make them very confusing. So it's really a map language that we really need to deal with. And I'm sure most of you have been using maps over many years, and indeed are building up a lot of knowledge about the ornament and the symbols that are across the page. I've just put up on the screen here a key I use, and this key provides a rough guide to the boundary lines, ornament, and symbols used on early OS maps. So you'll have county, barony, parish, and townland boundaries, and they all have a different style of line, as you can see down the left side of the screen. And the type of land is differed by using specific symbols or ornament. Symbols are designed to be simple, often looking like the features they represent. This means things can be quickly and easily recognized as you look across a map. And on the right, as you can see, towards the top on the right, you have ornament around ground. You have different features such as rough pasture, cropping rock, rough pasture again, winds, a castle site, and indeed they'll not be labelled as types on the ordnance surveys that we use on a regular basis, but you can refer to these ornaments and keys for the specific date to see what the actual symbols mean. On the left-hand side, it's really important, I feel, the different lines that are on certain maps, and they do change as dates or chronology progresses and the land is resurveyed. Obviously, the most important, I think, from a local point of view or local studies would be the townlands, and they are quite a small dot here in the 6-inch to 1 mile maps that we will be showcasing later. This is a sheet number 7 of Donaghadee area, 1834, and it shows, and I've just a small piece sliced out to show Grey Abbey town and local area. On this sheet, we can locate the village of Grey Abbey, which is on the right, the shore, roadways, woodland, and even the Abbey ruins, which is off to the right of the screen. A fort, and a site called Giant's Grave towards the top of the screen here. So each townland is then measured in AP or A, R, and P, as you can see here in the middle, A, R, and P. And that relates to acres, roods, and perches, which is a principle of 4 in the division. So everything's 4 times larger than the previous. Of course, a map such as this shows objects as being very much smaller than they are in real life. And that is quite an obvious statement to make, but it's something we always have to be aware of. The relationship between the features on the map to the rail size and
Sorry, folks, I think we keep
shown as a rate then is at a scale of 1 centimetre to 10,560 centimetres, or 6 inches to 1 mile. With the first edition, there are no grid references on early OS maps. They were first created for military maps in 1919, and a committee devised the present national grid in 1938 based on using the international meter. Also look out for letter notations and OS maps. And I have here just some of them that are more popular across maps, across the local landscape. And you'll find letters such as MS, which stands for a milestone, or BP for a boundary post. And indeed, this is the picture in the 1830s. So what about maps at PRONI? Maps on a scale of 6 inches to 1 statute mile were completed for the whole country by 1842, and they can be found using the PRONI reference OS-1 and OS-2. Online, if you're unfamiliar with the e-catalogue or the electronic catalogue, there's very good reference material there where a colleague will walk you through using the catalogue to find certain records that you then can consult at PRONI. And indeed, there's workshops during lunch times, and look out for those on our listings, where you can join into a small group and enjoy using the e-catalogue and become more proficient in using that for your orders. This massive undertaking ensured that Ireland was surveyed and mapped with a degree of thoroughness and accuracy unique for its time. As you can see from the list, by 1846, if I can change my slides, they're behaving. By 1846, when the publication of the first edition of the 6-inch map was completed, revision of the early 6-inch maps had already begun. The Ordnance Survey maps at 25 inch to 1 mile are a most faithful and detailed record of the landscape for this period of the 19th and early 20th century. Researchers interested in town plans should also consult OS-8. The collection is made up of printed plans of 163 towns in Northern Ireland and 2 towns south of the border. It complements OS-9, a collection of manuscript town maps, which frequently contain older unpublished maps of the towns found in the series. OS-8. After the 1950s, the system changed again, covering Ireland as a whole and not on a county basis. This new series superseded the 6-inch county maps and is known as the Irish Grid, and it's found at OS-7. The main demo, I'm not at all frightened at going live with a demo in just a few moments, but the main demo this evening will be the PRONI Historical Maps Viewer, because I want to show you some of the tricks of using it and putting a lot of this theory into play in understanding what is actually written on these sheets, layering them up and viewing them for certain areas, and indeed some geographical concerns for you to look out for, not necessarily for your area, but generally across the 6 counties of present-day Northern Ireland. On the Historical Maps Viewer, and indeed my colleague will be putting these references or links into the chat as we go along, or as at the beginning. But on the Historical Maps Viewer, you can browse 1500 Ordnance Survey of Northern Ireland maps dating from 1832 through to 1986. You can search by townland, parish or town, city, or by using a modern postal address. So if nothing else, if you haven't used it before, type in your own address and see what happens. You can then compare historical Osney maps with 4 modern base maps, including aerial imagery, which is my favourite, and I'll demo that in a little moment. You can find landmarks and buildings of historical interest, such as graveyards, churches, and schools. And you can discover 16,000 sites of historic or archaeological interest from the Northern Ireland Sites and Monuments Record, which have been provided courtesy of Historic Environment Division. I would like to demonstrate the Maps Viewer live, and I encourage you to click on the link found in the chat box via the PRONI website to explore some of the key cartographic concerns around boundaries, sites, and names. And just before I will change over my screen, I'd just like you to think, what is a boundary? What is a boundary to you? And we'll explore that and go through a few of the ideas live on the demonstration. So everyone cross their fingers at this point, and you'll just see the screen swapping over. I hope you can see that. If Gemma can say yes or no.
Yes, that's the website, Glenn, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gemma. By the way, Gemma, my colleague, is just keeping everything alive this evening on your screen. I'm just doing a bit of talking. This is the PRONI website, okay? And I'm just showing you this in case you navigate through the website. The link in the chat will take you straight through to the application for searching, but I'm going to click through on this just to show you basically where to navigate through. There's some advice on using it before you start, and there is actually a very good user guide on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which you can learn some of the widgets and what you can do with it. I'm going to be a little more technical this evening and just showing you a few of the things that I come across. And we're just loading on now. And rather than ask you what you think a boundary is, I think I should tell you what I think a boundary is. And if you have any questions or comments or would like to add, I know from looking at the list of names, there's quite a few very proficient map users and indeed experts. And I'd encourage during the actual question and answer session after my demo, to join in, share your knowledge, share the little tricks of the trade, and we'll all learn as a result. So what is a boundary? The maps to me are all about boundaries. And a boundary is a real or imaginary line that separates two things. The most obvious type of boundary is a physical boundary. And it can be a naturally occurring barrier between two areas, such as mountains or rivers, or a man-made barrier, such as hedges, ditches, fences, or tree plantation. More interestingly is the lines in which humans have drawn across the paper landscape, the human boundaries, which are a result of civil, religious, or political administration, including townland, municipal or borough, parish, diocese, catchment, barony, county, province, nation, ordnance, country, and continent. And such boundaries may have physical markers in the landscape also. So they do come together where the human has decided to use the natural feature as the boundary for their human area. In civil parish boundaries, the parish was once an ecclesiastical unit of territory, at first based on early Christian and monastic settlements, later used by the established Church of Ireland after the Reformation. It was then also adopted as a civil administrative area. And any examples I'm going to show you on this search this evening are very random indeed, or they maybe pose a specific question for us. So I'm just going to type into this, the top here of the search box in the top left. Once you get into the map, I'm just going to put in a parish name. Okay, and I'm going to just put in Seago, okay, which is in County Armagh. And as you can see there, we're looking for parish, if it will go down for me. It's not behaving itself. I don't think everyone crossed their fingers. We'll go this way and we'll search for the parish of Seago. And it's immediately bringing up the actual parish within the context of the Portadown and Lurgan area. Okay, on the map, it will outline the actual parish. And it'll use a blue line to just show you the extent of the parish. Now, what I'm going to do here, this is a base map. I'm just going to put under the base map layers. So this is quite slow, bear with me, please. Just putting in aerial photography instead. I'm just preparing for the next example. Okay, so you can just see the extent of the parish of Seago drawn across the landscape with the aerial photography underneath. I'm then going to layer up the first edition that we were talking about just over the top. And we'll do a layer just of those two. So you can drag across and view the actual first edition layered on top of the aerial imagery. And some of us are very familiar with our local area. And then you can layer and just look at the features of the landscape today and of a point that are closer. Let's just zoom in to just show you basically what I'm looking at here. And I'm just looking at a field in the parish, and there we have development today. So I just wanted to show you in the search in the top left, very simply searching for a parish. The next thing I'd like to show you is townland boundaries. And I hope everyone who signed up to this will know the townlands in which they're interested in. I'm sitting in the townland of Rosconer near the Mourne Mountains at the moment, speaking to you. And a townland is the smallest administrative division throughout the island of Ireland that is still in use. Because it's small, it really narrows down your interest to the smallest geographical pocket of land across the ordnance landscape. So these small divisions of land were used as the basis for plantation grants in the 16th and 17th centuries, and for the leasing of land on the great landed estates from the early 17th century. So you can use map information even as an index, a geographical index, to drill into other records that are organized in a different way, such as a landed estate, which townlands are relevant to this landed estate, or which landed estate is relevant to the certain townlands. In Northern Ireland, there are over 9,000 townlands, and indeed there's some debate at the age of the townlands. From administrative and written point of view, you're going back to the 16th century, but they're almost certainly predating that in the allocation of land, maybe in the early Christian period. The smallest townland is 1 acre, and towards maybe more coastal areas, you get massive townlands of many acres or miles. And it really looks to me very much relating to the quality or the fertility of the land in which the townland is measured. So a very fertile townland will be extremely small. The next thing I'll show you, just with townlands, just searching for a townland name. Again, you can scan along the area in which you're interested in and find the townland names, but I'm just showing you starting with the townland name at the moment. And we'll just go to one in a different county, and we'll go to Muckross. And I've chosen this one because it's in County Fermanagh, and it's just quite nice just to see how the Ordnance have drawn the actual waterscape and the island. As you can see, the island's a lot smaller on the Ordnance as it is today, but it's quite accurate there on the land surface. You can see some reclaimed land as I scroll across. And it's just nice if this is your area, what is relevant to your local study. You can see there on the Ordnance some ornament for woodland, and it looks wooded, and then some arable or field landscape, agricultural landscape, which is still there today. And some of the buildings are there as we go across. Some things just to look out about townlands. What I'll do towards the end is just pick an area randomly and just show you how I'll unravel a lot of these key geographical boundaries the opposite way, not knowing the names of what I'm actually interested in. But we're starting just with the names. I want just to show you what the term is, detached townlands. The several parishes have a single or several townlands located away from the main group. And this is something just to remember if you're doing a study at a parish or townland level. They're not necessarily together, and there may be different reasons for that historically. So the main group would be centered together, but there may be outlying ones. For example, the parish of Newry in County Down, which is 2 or more detached townlands. So I'm just going, and I just want to demonstrate that visually. I know it seems quite slow, but we'll go to the parish of Newry. And I'm just demonstrating here, you see the scale, how it goes out. Obviously, Newry is towards the South Down area here, but there are also townlands in County Armagh. And as we zoom in, there's a little detachment here, as you can see in the aerial photography. North of the actual main lordship or parish of Newry. And it seems to be the actual source of the river that runs through the actual parish. So there is a lot of geographical division and indeed land transfer, which you can unravel in the PRONI record for why some of the townlands seem detached today. But the Clanrye River source is actually here, and it runs right down through Bagnall's lands in the parish of Newry. There's also a term called split townlands. And indeed, historically, a townland may have been larger originally, and down the line, it has been split into more than one, and its name changes slightly. The example I'll show you for this townland And I'll just change this. I'll just use one Ballyskay. And just from the list here, as you can see coming up, you have Ballyskay High, Newtonards, and Ballyskay Low, Newtonards. And that's the two I wanted just to show you to prove the point. They're beside each other, and there's one extent, and then the other one, which will be low, is just beside it. Okay, which is there. So there's a small one called Ballyskay Low, and then the extent high. And indeed, it's looking at the records in PRONI, and indeed some work done by the place names index NI. The original townland may have been split or divided in 1605, giving the high and the low names to its history. Now, I'd like to look at particular sites, and I know we could, or I could speak maybe 5 hours this evening. And Gemma will probably put in the chat that we've probably gone for 5 hours. But I want just to show you as much as possible in the time that we have before questions. I'll go to townlands again, and I'm going just to show you a certain layering for Edenderry, and I'm going to select Drumbo. And this is just to prove that a townland name could be reused right across the landscape, and you may need the parish name to narrow down the exact townland. But we're going to go to Drumbo. We're going to layer up a couple of maps this time. We're going to go with the historical first edition, my favorite, and we'll go for a later one, the Ordnance third edition. And you use the widgets at the top, this little box, to layer which is first and second. So we'll go like that. And second, we'll go with the third. Okay, so the actual third edition's on the left and the first edition's on the right. And I just want to just go across and just show you one feature. Some of you will be familiar with Giant's Ring in South Belfast, Shaw's Bridge. And I'm just showing you really how the first and third editions notate the archaeological site or feature on the map. When you go across round Edenderry, you can see the transformation of the industrial landscape, as you can see there. So this layering is extremely positive from a local history point of view and how the landscape transformed within 50 or 60 years in this case. And I just want to do something else. I'm going to take off a layer. And put on the aerial. And slowly, it's worth waiting on just to show how the first edition layers across the actual aerial photography and the monument today. The accuracy is extremely interesting. And something I can't interact with you obviously in a virtual room, but very obvious, and I'm sure most of you have already noticed, the blue line. And the blue line is the parish line, and it goes around the townland of Edenderry in the parish of Drumbo, goes around the pre-existing feature. Okay, so the lines are drawn around rather than through the archaeological feature. which I think is an interesting point for us to remember from a chronological point of view. Towns also are revealed. Let's go to a town just to show you what it looks like. The real lesson is playing with this resource for your local area, but I wanted just to show you the town of Dundrum, just because the aerial photography for the estuary is quite impressive in my view. And you have the actual castle grounds at the top of the screen here. As you can see there, they're there today, but the expansion of the village in between 1832 to 39 to now, you can unravel. And when you layer up the other survey sheets, you can just see this small village or town growing and expanding as each survey progresses across the landscape. Just clicking just down on one point will provide a little box of information that you need just to know what on earth the little drawing is of. In this case, it's the townland is Dundrum. It's actually the town of Dundrum, parish Kilmegan. And when you press this little arrow at the top, this is one of the most important things in my view. It provides the OS Historical First Edition date, the country or county, the sheet number, but most important under product code is the full reference that you would need in PRONI to view the original map. If you are looking at this in detail at your desk in the reading room in Belfast at PRONI. So you would need to note down OS/6/3/44/1 for this survey of 1834 on this sheet number 44. So over everything, navigating around the boundaries, I feel the Historical Maps Viewer is a brilliant index to the original map sheets that you can view on site at PRONI. Just clicking on to 3 and 4, it's just the townland we'll be giving it, and 4 then is just the parish, just in a different format. Clicking zoom to will give you the context of the landscape of that particular parish within the wider landscape. Okay, the next thing, I think we're okay for time because we published 1/4 past. There's not much more to go before questions. I've maybe 2 or 3 things to show you. The next thing I wanted to just show you is a townland. Townland. And we'll go with Glasdrumman Upper, which is near where we're actually here on the map, Kilkeel. If you remember, I mentioned during the first introduction or notes, thinking of the Ordnance Survey as an engineer's record or artifact. I also mentioned that I was sitting near the moorings and being familiar with the landscape. I just wanted to show you the summit of Donard on the map. If we can get that in. We're near it. I promise you I'm from the area.
Just to the left a bit, maybe, Glenn?
Just to the left. There we are. It's worth it, Gemma. Hold on. I'm just going in just to the Great Cairn, which was used by Ordnance Survey. And I'm going to layer up just another couple of maps just to show you if I can get back to these maps. This is the Great Cairn at the top on the map in the middle. And this reference obviously is the measurement. When we go to the aerial photography, we see the cairn, but just off to the southeast or west, if I bring it in, is those stones that I mentioned that would have been used by the actual surveyors on the ground, that you can see the little rings of stones that the tents would have been on during their measurement, and placing this cairn measurement or trig point on the landscape. And it's really important, I think, to understand the numbers on the Ordnance Survey, to know the effort and engineering that came into this endeavour. Now, the other thing that is of great interest, I think, is the names, places and people that are drawn across the landscape. And I'm sure asking, people are not drawn along the landscape. And I would argue actually they are. And you find people and places through names, and the name books are also provided in PRONI as an original source. Also, I'd encourage you to look at the Place Names NI website, just to look at some of the history of the place names. We were looking a moment ago for Muckross, and looking at that website, we actually find that it was termed Pig Peninsula. And of course, somewhere such as Newton Stewart, County Tyrone, will have the contextual information that it was the Stewart family, forming this landscape. And then the landscape or settlements created by these individuals are mapped across the landscape. Last thing, and I promise before questions, indeed we could spend days looking at something like this. I just want to look at one more thing, and we'll choose a town. And we'll go with Portaferry. And in this case, I want to look at points of interest, just to show you that before we have some questions. Points of interest, as you can see, is on the layer list. And there's massive amount of data applied across the actual maps on the maps viewer. And that will help us all basically in navigating the landscape. I'm looking at Portaferry. It's quite a small area, just to show you. Very often I use Belfast, and the scatter across Belfast is immense. But looking at Portaferry, you can see archaeological sites. When you click on them, there we have townland of Ballymurphy. And when you go across, townland of Ballyphilip, the Ordnance Survey. It's just taking a moment to load. Here we are. We have, when you click on the blue spot, you have the Sites and Monuments record for Portaferry Castle or Tower House, fortification, late medieval and state care, and the grid reference, etc. So you have information on what that point is within that parish. Looking at a scatter of schools, we'll click on one of those and click across. There's the reference. And it's a national school, and the dated description on the map is 1858. Now that is indicating where it appeared on the map, not the foundation of the school. But when you layer up, you can see when the school was there and when it, or where before it was there and when it appeared, and narrowed down to 5 years, the foundation of a certain school, and indeed when it disappeared again in later editions when you're interested in other records. And just to prove, last thing, we'll go to Belfast. And hopefully the points of interest will layer up. There we are. And when you, as you can see from a landscape such as a city or a large town, the actual points of interest and the dates of change, etc., are very relevant to our local studies. And you can click on many of them there, both from a legal point of view, churches, schools, archaeological sites, etc., and gain a lot of information, and indeed use this as an index to access other relevant records in PRONI, such as school records, such as church records for an area that is of interest to you. And indeed, from a geographical point of view, you can find maybe a cluster of churches that are possible for the records for an area that you're interested in and narrow it down from that point of view.